Today from the Global Lane, Trump-Xi Summit, America First, overturning 50 years of pro-China policy.
The regime is unstable, and I have no doubt that a lot of that is due to the tariff regime that Donald Trump has imposed on China.
The International Day of Prayer for the Persecuted Church. This year's focus, praying for Christians under fire in the DRC and Nigeria.
When we sit down with them and say, hey, how can we help you? We're going back to America. We're going to talk to Christians there. How can they help you? The first thing they ask us to do is to pray.
Strange bedfellows. The leftist and Islamist alliance putting Zohran Mamdani on the verge of mayoral victory in New York City.
With this world view, with this belief about the Jews, about Christians, the infidels, I am very concerned about the future of New York City.
Inspired by Charlie Kirk, the Colorado Christian fighting to express her faith in a high school parking lot. And it's all right here on the Global Lane. Fentanyl, soybeans, and rare earth metals. Those were among the issues of concern on the agenda between President Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. What led to this historic meeting? Will relations and trade between the two global economic powers change significantly in the long term, or will it be back to business as usual? Well, joining us with some insights is veteran journalist and author Lee Smith. His latest book is titled China Matrix, the epic story of how Donald Trump shattered a deadly pact. When these two leaders meet, Lee, agreements are made, tensions are lessened for a while. Before Donald Trump became president, we know that China always seemed to have the edge, an advantage in the relationship between the two countries. And I'm sure you and others believe it all started back in February of 1972, when Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger opened the door to relations with the communist government. So how has that worked out for the United States since then?
Yeah, it's worked out terribly, and that's exactly when it starts. You know, the China Matrix, I have a long interview with President Trump in there, and in fact, he puts it back there as well, right at the origin point, 1972. Now, in fact, a lot of people will not say that was a bad thing. Even people who later became critical of the U.S.-China relationship say, well, it devolved somewhere along the way, but it started off on a really good footing. It was a very important geopolitical maneuver to hurt the Soviets. In fact, it wasn't, which I explain in the China Matrix. It started as a very bad idea, and it's only gotten worse over time. And what the book is really about, it's about how Donald Trump is the first president of the United States to acknowledge that this relationship has been extremely destructive toward our peace and prosperity, and to do something about it. And that's what the meeting with Xi Jinping is about.
Lee, what about these illegal foreign donations to the DNC and Bill Clinton in 1996? How can we forget that? Chinagate, Charlie Tree, and then also the millions of dollars in business given to President Biden's son, Hunter. More recently, China's spy, Fang, remember her? She had a relationship with Congressman Eric Swalwell, and he previously sat on the House Foreign Relations Committee. So how significant and common are these type of Chinese influences on Capitol Hill and the U.S. government?
In context, unfortunately, it's all too common. But look, if you pull these things apart, I'm really glad you mentioned Chinagate, because I have a long section on the book in there. And what becomes clear is that President Bill Clinton was recruited in a Chinese intelligence operation. Now, I don't think the president understood what was going on, and it started to happen when he first became governor of Arkansas. But the Chinese zeroed in on him, and what happened with Chinagate was this money coming in. It wasn't just strange donations coming in from people affiliated with the People's Republic of China. It came in from Chinese intelligence officers, from Chinese intelligence assets. So it's a very big deal. But again, this was kind of well, it was totally obscured at the time. The same thing with Swalwell's relationship with Fang, as you say, and the same thing with Hunter Biden's access to Chinese capital. And this started in a very bad way because when his father, the then Vice President Joe Biden, he basically arranged for Chinese companies to be able to defraud, to come on U.S. capital markets and defraud American investors. So it's a half-century long history of awful, shameful things that American political and corporate elites have done to hurt this country, and they've worked in partnership with the Chinese Communist Party to hurt America.
So selling out America for personal profit. On trade and tariffs, how important is it to the people of the United States to diversify, get away from this dependence on China, especially for the supply of rare earth metals and pharmaceuticals?
It's very important, and these are strategic industries that the Chinese have targeted, again, to hurt Americans. Steel is another. I understand why people are concerned about tariffs, and I do wish that the president would address it more clearly, why tariffs are so important and the history of tariffs in this country. Remember, Alexander Hamilton thought the tariffs were very important. It's very important to U.S. Economic security as well as our national security. So again, I can understand why people are concerned. And one of the things that the China Matrix does is it explains why tariffs are important and why in lots of ways the idea of free trade is sort of spun out of control, because what we've been doing with China since the World Trade Organization, since China entered the WTO in 2001, is not free and fair trade at all. And this is a point that President Trump has underscored again and again.
So, Lee, quickly, what's the best way to proceed with China in the future and avoid a hot war?
I mean, I think that the president is doing right now. I mean, the tariffs are having a very dramatic effect on China. It's important for us to keep in mind that this is a very brittle communist party, and the United States is the oldest and greatest democracy in the world. So we are resilient where the Communist Party is not.
So Xi Jinping has some trouble right now with the military and his generals.
We don't have all the information behind what's happened with Xi's military, with the People's Liberation Army. But what it shows is that the regime is unstable, and I have no doubt that a lot of that is due to the tariff regime that Donald Trump has imposed on China.
Okay, the book just released this month is China Matrix, the epic story on how Donald Trump shattered a deadly pact. Lee Smith, always good to talk with you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for bringing me on today.
For years, CBN News has reported about the persecution of Christians in Nigeria. Tens of thousands have died at the hands of Islamic terror groups Boko Haram, the Islamic State West Africa province, and Fulani herdsmen. Now some legacy media outlets are finally reporting what we've been telling you all along. So what can be done now that the plight of Nigerian Christians is receiving broader attention right here in America and around the world? The first step is prayer. Pray. Ask the Holy Spirit what he would have you do, how he wants you and your church to respond. And you can begin on Sunday, November 2nd, the International Day of Prayer for the Persecuted Church. Not only for Nigerian Christians, but persecuted followers of Jesus worldwide. Joining us with more is Todd Nettleton, Voice of the Martyrs Media Relations Chief and host of VOM Radio. Todd, let's discuss Nigeria in a moment, but first, around the world, Christians and their churches will be praying for persecuted Christians. Why?
You know, Gary, the great thing about the International Day of Prayer for Persecuted Christians is it wasn't our idea at Voice of the Martyrs. It's certainly not some kind of marketing program. This is the first thing that persecuted Christians ask us to do. Well, when we sit down with them and say, hey, how can we help you? We're going back to America. We're going to talk to Christians there. How can they help you? The first thing they ask us to do is to pray. And so the International Day of Prayer for Persecuted Christians is an answer to their request that we pray for them.
And Christians in Nigeria are in desperate need of prayer and action, I might add. So tell us the latest there. Senator Ted Cruz contends it's genocide. So how bad is it?
You know, for Christians in northern Nigeria, that they know every time they gather for worship, even if they are in their homes, even if they are going out to their fields, they are at risk. They are at risk of attacks, as you mentioned, Boko Haram, other radical Islamist groups that are active in northern Nigeria. And every year and every election cycle in Nigeria, we hear a government promise to solve this problem, promise to provide protection for religious minorities like Christians in the north. And every year we see more attacks and more people killed. So it's either a lack of will or a lack of ability, but our brothers and sisters in northern Nigeria are certainly suffering and, like I say, constantly at risk of attack.
Well, I mean, we're getting more attention on Nigeria now, so what needs to be done?
That's a great question, and certainly there are some political aspects of that. There are, strengthening the Nigerian response, strengthening the Nigerian police and military, but ultimately this is a spiritual question. And Jesus said, "The world hates me, and when you follow me, the world will hate you too." And our brothers and sisters in northern Nigeria are experiencing the reality, the truth of what Jesus said. The Bible also tells us, as part of the body of Christ, that when one part suffers, we're all supposed to feel that pain. So part of the answer to that question is we as Christians, we need to stand with our Nigerian brothers and sisters. We need to pray for them. We need to help when they're persecuted, when their homes are destroyed, when their husbands are killed. We need to be willing to stand with them and encourage them and provide for them. So that's a part of the answer to that question as well.
Well, elsewhere, this year for IDOB Sunday, VOM is putting special prayer emphasis on the DRC. Why the Democratic Republic of Congo?
We've seen so many violent attacks, even in the last few months in DRC. There are more than 100 armed groups that are fighting in the country of Democratic Republic of the Congo right now. And many of them are motivated by that Islamist ideology. The same ideology that motivates Boko Haram in Nigeria is motivating some of the groups in DRC that are attacking churches, targeting pastors, and especially targeting Christians. And like I say, the level of violence is just almost unconscionable what they are doing to our Christian brothers and sisters. And so we want to raise awareness of that. We want people to be able to pray effectively. And so one of the things we do each year for the International Day of Prayer for Persecuted Christians is a short video that you can share in a church service, in a Sunday school class, even with your family and your family devotions time. And this year, that video focuses on DRC.
And they can get that at VOM or download it, or how do they get it?
Persecution.com/IDOP for International Day of Prayer, persecution.com/IDOP. The video is free. You can download it. We'll even send you a DVD. If you prefer to have a solid copy of it, we'll send a DVD to you. We want people to know these stories. We want people to pray for our persecuted brothers and sisters.
And Todd, you've been serving the Persecuted Church with VOM for about 25 years now, correct?
Yeah, a little more than that.
Yeah, a little more than that. So is the persecution against followers of Jesus around the world getting worse? What troubles you the most about it?
I think, yes, persecution is increasing, and that's sort of the hard side of that story. The good side of that story is part of the reason for that is the church is growing. The church is growing in North Africa, where Christians are often persecuted by their families. The church is growing in China, where the communist government is doing everything they can to shut it down. The church is growing in Iran, which means there are more Christians and more house church leaders that are available to arrest if you're the government of Iran. And so I try to be encouraged by the fact that the church is growing, even though I know it is coming at a high cost for our brothers and sisters in some of those countries.
So that's the hope, more church growth through the persecution, right?
Absolutely. Tertullian said, the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. We see the reality of that around the world. As Christians are persecuted, they have opportunities to respond with love and forgiveness. And that's an incredible testimony to the truth of the gospel.
And lead people to Christ, just like your founders, Richard and Sabina Wormbrand, did. Okay. The International Day of Prayer is Sunday, November 2nd, but we should be praying not only on that day, but every day, right, Todd?
Absolutely. That's my only qualm about the International Day of Prayer, is that somehow we kind of check it off our list and say, okay, we'll see you persecuted Christians next November. As you say, they are persecuted every day. They need our prayers every day. And so I don't want this to be something we just check off the list. We need to be in prayer constantly for brothers and sisters around the world. Okay,
a great reminder. Todd Nettleton, Voice of the Martyrs, thanks for sharing your insights.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Will the real Zohran Mamdani please stand up? With only days remaining until the election, the youthful and charismatic candidate for mayor of New York City leads in the polls by about 10%. At 34 years old, Mamdani has emphasized his democratic socialist beliefs, pledging to raise taxes on the wealthy in order to provide New Yorkers with free bus fares and childcare. Joining us to share his thoughts is political commentator Danny Bermawi. He's a former Muslim who converted to Christianity. He holds a master's degree in theological studies, and Danny spends time educating Western policymakers about the challenges posed by political Islam. His latest book is Islam, Israel, and the West. Danny, Zohran Mamdani identifies as a democratic socialist. However, you have reservations about his Islamic faith. His supporters argue that in America, we have religious freedom and his faith should not affect his capability to serve. What concerns you the most about electing a Muslim mayor in New York City?
Well, thank you, Gary, for having me. So basically, since the fall of the Ottoman Empire or the Islamic Caliphate in 1924 and the emergence of different terrorist organizations that seek to reestablish the Caliphate, jihad has been hiding under different banners: justice, liberation, resistance. And today in the West, jihad is hiding under the radical left ideologies, the same agendas, the same Islamic jihad is being rebranded in the West. But of course, they are capitalizing on the momentum that the radical left ideologies have acquired in the past few decades. So I'm concerned because Zohran Mamdani, when he, for example, endorsed Globalize the Intifada, and he refused to condemn Globalize the Intifada, if a communist is saying that word, then probably he's what he means is the communist revolution. However, if you're a Muslim and you say Globalize the Intifada, then what I hear is Khaybar, Khaybar ya Yahud. For those who don't understand what Khaybar means, it is that chant, the battle cry that has been repeated by Hamas, the Islamic Jihad, for a very long time. And it's about the Battle of Khaybar, or the tribe of Khaybar that Muhammad massacred and forced out of their homes in Al-Madinah. So with this attitude, with this world view, with this belief about the Jews, about Christians, the infidels, I am very concerned about the future of New York City.
When questions about his honesty, his Islamic faith arise, he and his supporters claim that the questioners are Islamophobic. One notable instance was when this issue was featured on the cover of the New York Post. Recently, Mamdani met with Imam Siraj Wahhaj, who is an unindicted co-conspirator in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, and Mamdani pointed out that no one had raised concerns when New York City mayors Bloomberg, de Blasio, or Adams met with Wahhaj. Is Mamdani being treated unfairly because of his Islamic faith?
Absolutely not. I want your audience to hear this, and this is very important. Mamdani's father, in his book, he accused the United States of America to be responsible for 9/11. He almost embraced the same view of the Iranian regime of the West, the great Satan. America is the great Satan. He considered suicide bombing to be a legitimate political action. So when Zohran Mamdani grew up in that environment with that father, you could imagine what does he think about the United States, or how does he see the world. But there's one more thing I want your audience to understand. Muslims, because of the cognitive dissonance that Islam creates, because Islam always accused the enemies of Allah to be evil, to be corrupt, to be this and that, they always have to find proof, to find evidence, to justify the hatred toward the enemies of Allah. And they found the treasure in the radical left ideologies, post-colonialism, and all of this, the school of thought that demonized the West. Now it's being embraced by Muslims, and they are using it to justify their religious sentiments. He believes the same thing that jihadists believe about the West. However, he is using the rhetoric and the terminologies of the radical left in order to justify what he wants to do.
Seems that true Islamic principles are often viewed as incompatible with socialism and communism, but during campus protests, we observed individuals from the LGBTQ+ community, lesbians, gays, transgender people, expressing support for Hamas. However, it's important to note that Hamas would likely harm them if they resided in Gaza. So this raises the question, why do we see this alliance between Muslims and leftists? Why do they embrace one another?
Well, both ideologies don't believe in the concept of nation state, right? The radical left, they want to tear down borders. They want, of course, the ideologues among them, they believe in this human brotherhood, and they want to fight all the power structure. So they are being used as a vehicle by Islamic Jihad in the West. They are helping them tear down the borders, push for immigration policies that help the Islamic movement to bring more immigrants into the West. And at the same time, Islam is an endless reservoir of fury and victimhood and grievances. And that is the currency the left loves. We will see in the future, if this is not stopped, we will see the same scenario that we saw in Iran when the communist and the Muslim movements, they came together to take down the Shah. But once the Al-Khomeini, the Ayatollah Al-Khomeini took over, he massacred the communists and he hunted them, and they were killed or they ended up in the exile.
Okay, we'll see what happens with the vote in New York City. Less than a week away now. Danny Bermawi, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Gary. I appreciate it.
A significant legal victory for the First Amendment rights of students in Colorado occurred this week. Sophia Shoemaker, a high school senior at Rampart High School in Colorado Springs, wanted to decorate her paid parking spot with a Christian message. All seniors are allowed to paint their parking spaces with school-approved artwork. Sophia aimed to express her Christian faith by including images of a shepherd and the parable of the lost sheep in her design. Additionally, she wanted to reference 1 Corinthians 13:4. However, the school district rejected her proposal, citing a policy that prohibits religious imagery. Inspired by Charlie Kirk's commitment to free speech, Sophia reached out to the First Liberty Institute of Texas. The institute sent a letter to the school district demanding that Sophia be allowed to express her faith, emphasizing that her faith design is an expression of private religious speech, not government speech, and is therefore protected by the First Amendment. Under the threat of a lawsuit, one that the school district would likely lose due to recent U.S. Supreme Court rulings on free speech, the district relented. Sophia will be allowed to repaint her paid parking spot. Folks, this was a no-brainer. While some people may be offended by Sophia's simple expression of Christian faith, the First Amendment protects her right to free speech, whether in a public square or a school parking lot. Well, that's it today from the Global Lane. Until next time, be blessed.